looking at Teams. This is the Teams interface. I encourage you to play around with it when you first get started, because there are lots of buttons, no doubt. So when my team began using this platform, we did so after identifying a couple of primary problems that needed solutions in our workflows. The first problem that we identified was in our communication structures. So we were almost exclusively communicating in person, and then occasionally via email, which is, I think, how a lot of us were conducting much of our interaction a couple of years ago. So we needed a way to communicate that suited our needs. Email is a little bit formal for my taste in a lot of situations. And also it can be difficult to find old emails and the files that you've sent via email. So that wasn't ideal for us. And in-person communication is obviously essential for much of the work that we do, but not always possible depending upon your circumstances. So when we came to Teams, that was the first thing we were looking for, was a communication structure. And we found that in, I would say, 3 different ways. The first way that we began using Teams for communication was through the direct messaging function, which if you look over here on the left-hand side, you'll see this chat icon, and that's what this is. So you can search for anyone at Vanderbilt up here at the top. I just pulled up one of my colleagues here so that you can see what this looks like. And it'll open up a new conversation with that person where you can do things like send messages back and forth, just like you would by a text message with a friend. And you can also attach files, and those files will be stored in OneDrive. So you can kind of see how Teams and OneDrive interact a little bit there. And you can see I've hidden all of my direct message conversations over here on the left-hand side, but this is how you would communicate one-on-one with your colleagues in a way that is a little bit less formal, and also that retains a really easily searchable history. So you can just search up here at the top and find anything that you've talked about previously, and you can use the Files tab to look at all the files that you've uploaded when talking to your colleagues. The second way that we were looking for a communication solution was as a group. So we really had to adopt this very quickly at the time. And so as you can see over here on the left-hand side, I have a couple of teams that I'm in. I have the Brightspace team up here at the top. I have the Center for Teaching, which has its own team. And then I have this collaboration workshop team down here at the bottom, which is specifically for today's session. And the teams themselves are really just buckets, and the buckets hold these pieces underneath them, which are called channels. The channels are where we actually talk to one another. So if you've used Slack, this probably looks a little bit familiar to you. It's a very similar structure. But as you can see in the Center for Teaching's team here, there are lots of different topics that we might discuss, and different teams may be differently involved in those topics. So in the Center for Teaching's case, some of us may be very invested in the Digital Media Lab and others may be less involved. But whoever is talking about it can do so by clicking on this channel and conversing within. And that also makes it very easy to sort of silo your conversation so that you can search them for later. If you look over here on the right-hand side, you can see what those communications look like. So you can see that I've had one of my colleagues send me a quick message this morning as an example. And you can see that he tagged me in it, which means that I'll be notified of that message that he sent. And I can, of course, reply to that message if I would like to and attach files just like I would via direct message. But I can also create new conversations about new topics. And if I'd like to, I can even tag the entire team. So if I want everybody to get a notification of something, I can do that here. This is probably 80% of how my team communicates what we're doing these days. This is how we manage projects. It's how we communicate ongoing issues and when things fall apart. And this is, it's really one of our primary business functions at this point. We found it super useful. And the third of our communication options you'll see up here in the top right is this Meet button. This one's a bit more on the controversial end because some people prefer Zoom strongly. Some people have real strong feelings about that. But our team started using Teams for our synchronous meetings. It has its own integrated video communication platform. And the specific reason that we use Teams as opposed to Zoom, they're very similar looking platforms. the specific reason that we've chosen Teams is because our conversations are retained. So when I send a chat message in a Teams video meeting, that conversation is retained up here in the chat window. So we can look back at those. I don't have to worry about saving them when I'm talking to my colleagues. I can come back to this later. So there are communication functionalities, sort of the very basics of those. And that's the first problem we identified. The second, I think, is a little bit more of a functional sort of overall structural issue that we encountered. This is probably not unfamiliar to anyone, the idea that your files are everywhere, whether that be Google Drive or Box, your local computer, wherever you're storing them, oftentimes they're going to be in a lot of different places. And we couldn't find things when we needed them. So if you look here in the Brightspace team, you can see that we have taken every file that we use regularly and put it into Teams. So we can access these from any computer anywhere, and we can check out our ongoing live documents that we need to edit regularly just through this platform. It's really a consolidation that we did, bringing everything that we work on regularly onto Teams. And in particular, I think this is really useful. I'll ask Aaron to help, or sorry, I'll ask, Aaron was the chat message. I'll ask Damon to take a look at this with me here, because if you look at a specific file in Teams and open it, it will launch in OneDrive, which is our file storage platform. And if you look up here at the top, you can see who else is interacting with the document, just like you would in Google Docs. And I can make changes to this by just typing in the document, as can Damon, actively at the same time. And this lets us collaborate on documents over time. So here he is, and you can see his little blue line. Yes, it is Latin. And in this way, we can maintain our documents together in a way that is collaborative. And in particular, one of the things that I love about this is that if you click this button up here at the top that says open in desktop app, then it launches in Microsoft Word, which is a more familiar platform for some of us. All of the same functionalities are retained this way. So if you're really comfortable in Microsoft Word, this might feel nicer to you. But in particular, if you click the document title and go to version history, you can see every change that's been made to the document that you're working on. And for those of us who have been versioning documents manually, this is an essential function. I can look back through all the changes that have been made and revert them if I need to. This has been super essential for us. So we've been using this platform for everything. For everything that we do, this is very central to our work. And those are the primary reasons, really, our file storage and consolidation, and our communication with one another and with our groups. This has solved most of those problems for us. So the last thing I want to touch on before I hand this over to Damon is the idea of sort of these roadblocks, right? The things that might stand in your way when it comes to implementing this with a project team or with a research group or anybody like that. I like to think that the folks in attendance today are very gung-ho about technology, but I will tell you for sure that not everyone that you meet will be. And some of the people that you're working closely with may not be super excited about using a new platform. It can feel very intimidating, and there are certainly a lot of buttons that you could click on. That can feel like a lot. So some things that I would recommend that you do early on if you're adopting this for a project team may include limiting the number of channels you have early on. So you can see that the Center for Teaching has quite a few, and that suits our workflow, but that could scare some people if they're very new to this platform. So start with maybe 2 to 3, give them a chance to acclimate, and then move on from there. And then I would also recommend that you, especially for our more technology hesitant folks, I think that it is really important to communicate this not as a replacement for our communication structures, but as an augment to them. So we don't want people to feel like we don't want to talk to them, and we don't want to meet them in person when that's possible to do. We want to communicate that this is something that's going to make our lives easier and not necessarily replace those one-on-one, hopefully in-person conversations.